Horizon Zero Dawn was not a game that I was ever planning on playing, and as most of you know, I'm an Xbox player, and Horizon Zero Dawn is strictly a PC and PlayStation exclusive. I just never found that much interest in it. I mean, hell, I didn't even know this game existed until like mid 2021, and since I was never going to play the game, I kinda just let it slide and didn't pay too much attention to it. And then Horizon Forbidden West came out. Now, why this was all over my front YouTube page, I don't have the slightest clue. But what it did manage to do was catch my eye. From what I heard, it was a pretty great game, and so was its predecessor. I never knew much about Zero Dawn until the months leading up to the release of Forbidden West, but when I started watching YouTube videos about Zero Dawn, this looked amazing. At this point, I was vaguely disappointed, because I would never be able to play Horizon due to it being a PlayStation exclusive. But as you can probably tell, I did play it. I got a good deal on a PS4, and I was kind of like, why not? So, I bought a PS4, and can you guess what the first game I got on it was? Horizon Zero Dawn. And no, I'm not an idiot, I didn't just buy a PS4 for 2 Horizon games. But anyway, I think this game is going to have a very special place in my heart. Not just because of the fact this is my first PlayStation game ever, but also because it's good. It's damn good. I never thought the idea of destroying robot dinosaurs with a bow and arrow could be something that was pulled off successfully in a video game. I mean, this was an extremely interesting premise for a game to start off with. Robot machines, a post-apocalyptic world with primitive technology? How in the world could this get pulled off? Well, Guerrilla Games knew exactly how to do it. This was an extreme leap for the studio, their most famous games being the FPS franchise Killzone. So I am entirely not sure how Guerrilla managed to make such a masterpiece on their first attempt at an open world game. There are so many things that this game does right. Sure, it's just an open world game, we've seen them all over the place in the last few years. The last 3 Assassin's Creed games, Ghost of Tsushima, Halo Infinite, and 100 more games in between. In this day and age, Zero Dawn managed to carve out its own path and etch its name as one of the best open world games of the last few years. And this video will show exactly how, in the greatness of Horizon Zero Dawn. I think we need to start in a place where most people are going to be wowed first when they open up Zero Dawn for the first time. And this is the world. The very first thing that caught my eye when I booted up this game was the absolutely beautiful landscape that laid out before me in the Embrace. To this day, the game still looks absolutely stunning. The light, the colors, and the contrast of your surroundings are just done so well. Every scene of the game is just screenshot worthy. The world just looks that good. I don't think this is just a graphics thing either. I think it was a conscious decision by the devs to crank up the contrast to the max. It helps give an otherworldly feeling when doing really ordinary things. I feel like the closest game that mimics this is probably going to be Assassin's Creed Odyssey, with its extremely bright and vibrant color scheme that is splayed all throughout the map. Everywhere the eyes can see are ruins of an old world. Remnants of lost battles and forgotten stories dot the map. The map is just so full of intrigue and wonder from its earliest, and it always just keeps the player in awe. But the world itself is not the only thing that is going to catch your eye. What this game was marketed on is going to do that by itself. The machines. The first time you ever see one of these is the most majestic sight I have ever seen in a video game. Each machine is going to be based on some part of an extinct animal in the Horizon universe. From horses to Tyrannosaurus Rex, to even mythological creatures like the Stormbird. Even seeing a Strider for the first time is one of the most exciting things that could have been created. And the question that is going to be in everyone's mind is, what created this? And this is going to be coming up later in this video. But for now, I just want to talk about the way these machines look. These machines look borderline majestic, and the first time you see them is just such an experience. It's also such an experience to just see a rendition of America like this. The Karja Sundom is one of the best looking environments I've ever seen by far, but somehow that isn't the most impressive aspect. This goes to the city on the mesa itself, Meridian. Built on a neighboring plateau to the Great Spire, Meridian towers over any other architecture for miles. Nothing comes close to how absolutely great this city feels and looks. It irradiates a sort of warm energy when traveling inside the city, and I guess that's what the Karja were going for. You can see each tribe's culture plainly wherever you go. The blue and white huts of the Banuk, the borderline metal cities that the Oseram created, and then the minimalist appeal of the Nora's embrace. If you can't already tell, I love the 4 tribes that we got to meet in this game. All of them feel unique in their own special way, and each region just screams whose territory you're in. The Banuk exist in the frosted-over remains of Yellowstone National Park. The Nora in the lands just south of there, while the Karja and Oseram take their place in the desert. These tribes are so well thought of and executed, it's insane. All of the tribes have fully written out backstories of exactly where their faith comes from. I mean, I can't imagine how much work it must have taken just to create this for a single game. I literally only have one complaint, and that's that the Oseram seem a little bit on the generic metalworking dwarf archetype, and honestly, it doesn't matter too much. With how unique the other tribes are, it doesn't really bother me too much that we have one uninspired group. But on a better note, each tribe has their own traditions that you can see plain as day. The Oseram are the metalworkers of the world, the best you'll find. The Karja are no doubt the strongest tribe we get to see in the game, with wearing all bright orange colors. The Banuk thread blue machine wires into their skin because of their connection with each and every machine that exists. And then there's the Nora, a matriarchal hunter-gatherer tribe which is the home of our protagonist, Aloy. Now, this sounds like I'm about to get into the narrative, but not just yet. First, we need to talk about how Aloy fits into this world. The world of Horizon Zero Dawn is a savage and ruthless one. Those who are not good enough perish. But there does seem to be some beauty in its nooks and crannies. One of these are the Tallnecks. Taking obvious inspiration from Ubisoft-style open-world games, Guerrilla Games created Tallnecks. Imagine synchronization points from Assassin's Creed, but this time, they move. These monstrous machines patrol various parts of the map, ready for Aloy to climb up onto them. Aloy needs to find a high enough point to jump onto the Tallneck's handholds, and once she does, she is ready to make the climb up. The climb isn't anything too special, but oh boy, the view. I've already been gushing about the graphics and how good this game looks, but I just have to say it once more. This game looks so good. The landscapes around the Tallnecks are just so perfect. You never really get this feeling from Assassin's Creed games, specifically the newer ones, and it's probably because you never have to do any work to get up there. It's like an instant reward. But in Horizon, there is actually some work that gets put in to get into the top of a Tallneck, which just makes it that much more satisfying in general. But you want to know what's even more satisfying? Aloy's rappel move. I mean, seriously, this is the coolest way of getting down from a high place I have ever seen. Leap of faith? Get out of here. I like whatever this is. Another thing that adds to the beauty of this game overall is the soundtrack. In my AC3 video, I said it was one of my favorite soundtracks of all time, only being topped by a handful of games. And this is in that handful. I adore the music in this game, both the exploration and combat music. It's not often that I create an entire playlist off of just one video game soundtrack, but I literally have an entire Horizon playlist with just songs from the games. The composers really get this feeling of just primal technology and the new modern ones. The way that the past and future combine into one track is just so amazing. I've never really seen a soundtrack do that ever in video games, and that's just why I like it so much. But one thing that the music does do very well is make Aloy seem so much more badass. So now, let's talk about my favorite part of the game, the combat. I think the most interesting part about this game's combat is just how it gets across the idea of a fight between a human and a machine. With the game taking place in a primitive society where the most advanced weapon in sight is a bow, it doesn't really make sense that people will be able to kill machines the size of buildings, but yet, they can. You can. I cannot get this across how much this premise should not have worked. There is no realistic way the combat between a human and a robot could ever be seen as any way realistic, but somehow Zero Dawn actually manages to kind of pull it off. And the way that Horizon does this is with weak points. We all probably know what weak points are. They're in a bunch of different video games. It's a vulnerable spot on an enemy to get increased damage. This is what the game uses to ensure its combat feels great. Unlike in most games where the head of a creature is its increased damage bot, in Horizon it can be anywhere depending on what kind of machine Aloy is facing. These will be marked with yellow spots whenever Aloy uses her focus. Hitting a machine anywhere other than its weak point will basically do nothing for you except waste some of your ammo. Its armor is almost impenetrable for the most part. Each machine will have its own weak point that will be able to cause damage. Now, this doesn't sound too interesting. I mean, it's basically just that you have to have good aim to win a fight, right? That could not be further from the truth. Zero Dawn's combat is all about planning and execution. And this is because each weak point isn't just a weak point, it's a part of the machine. And depending on which weak point is hit, a different action may occur. If you shoot a weapon off of a Thunderjaw, you'll remove its ranged attack entirely. If you shoot a Fire Bellowback's Gullet Sack, it will erupt into flames and lose its ability to create fire. In the background, you can actually see me apply shock damage to a Scorcher, and this is because I shot off one of its components. And when said component is shot off, that will always trigger shock damage, but only on this machine and only with that component. And that's really the key to it. It's that these weak points aren't just weak points. You can't shoot all willy-nilly. You actually need to understand what you're doing in order to actually be efficient. For example, tearing off a blaze canister from a machine will get you the resource and harm the machine, but won't do much else. Shooting a blaze canister with a perfectly aimed fire arrow will set it ablaze. Horizon Zero Dawn is one of my favorite games in this way because of just how much strategy is actually involved. You can remove entire attacks off of a creature if you know how to do it. It is crucial to prioritize targets. If there's an annoying attack that can be disabled by destroying a component, do it as soon as humanly possible in the fight. Or maybe you want to turn the tides of the fight back to you. And there is a way to gain an extreme amount of power extremely quickly. And this, again, has to deal with machines' components. Some machines, like the Thunderjaw and Ravager, have usable weapons on them. This means that if you do enough tear damage, the weapon will fall right off, and right into your hands. This shifts the power dynamic between Aloy and the machines immensely. No longer are you at their disposal. You control the battlefield now. These weapons are slow and clunky, but deal a shitload of damage to just about anything that gets in their way. And this is the strategy that I was talking about. It takes so much more than just knowing a machine's weak spots. It's knowing how to manipulate them to your gain to be as efficient as possible. This isn't the only thing that Aloy can use to her advantage. Along with her bow, there are many different weapons to accompany it. Up until halfway through the game, I just used my hunter and sharpshot bows to deal as much damage as possible. But there was one crucial aspect of Zero Dawn that I was forgetting, and I was playing the game totally wrong. This little tidbit that I forgot turns out to be one of the most helpful things in my 2 playthroughs of the game, and these are the elemental states. Every machine has a weakness and a strength to each element. Choosing which elemental state to put the enemy in is a super crucial part to making a fight go your way. For example, a Sawtooth is weak to fire, making it extremely easy to kill if you actually do manage to inflict it with fire arrows. A Fire Bellowback is super weak to frost damage and can easily be killed from there. I've been talking about what these can be used for, but I've never actually described how these work. Each element does a different thing to whatever machine it hits. Fire deals damage over time. Shock freezes enemies in place for a short period and allows for easier component targeting. Corruption pits foe against foe in order to turn the tables on enemies. And my favorite, Frost, increases damage to all enemies currently in its state. Each element can be fired using a different weapon type. Fire can be shot with arrows, while all others can be used by special arrows or slings. All of these elements can be used to insanely good effect if done right. It is so easy to kill even the highest level enemies if you're competent enough in your aiming and planning skills. And if there's one thing that Horizon Zero Dawn gets right all of the time, it's the feeling of power progression throughout the game. The first time I fought a Thunderjaw, as you're seeing here, it took me a solid 10 minutes using just normal arrows and targeting its weak points on normal difficulty. But by the time I had finished my second playthrough on Ultra Hard, I killed a corrupted Thunderjaw, which is even more powerful than a regular Thunderjaw, I'll get to that in a moment, in just 3 minutes. You are currently seeing that footage in the background. Using all of the skills that I had learned through my 100 odd hours with the game, I destroyed this thing, weakening it with frosts, quickly tearing off its disc launchers, and using it against it makes short work of the being that I had struggled with for so long. It's such an amazing feeling when you just get better at a game and become more powerful. Not just because you've upgraded your gear, but because you've learned on how to exploit every weakness of the enemy. Yeah, I understand that it was easier to take down a Thunderjaw considering I was at max level and had better gear, but just look at the way I'm playing this. I'm jumping up and down in order to abuse the Hunter's Instinct skill that slows down time during a jump or slide. I'm also taking much more of an advantage of elemental states throughout the entire fight. I don't think my improvement can just be wrapped up into the further down the game line. I think it falls into the player naturally learning the best ways to kill machines and how to do it in essentially the fastest way possible. So I mentioned the Hunter's Instinct ability that slows down time whenever Aloy is in a jump and aiming, and it brings me to another aspect of the gameplay, concentration. Now this is the run-of-the-mill slow down time ability that allows for easier targeting of weak points and allows you to get easier shots in. You aim down your sights and you press down on the right stick. You can use this ability for a few seconds before the game forces you out of it, and you have to wait until it recharges again in order to use it. Now, this is an extremely useful tool. As I said, it makes it much easier to hit enemies and deal damage to them. But it is negated by one thing, and one thing only. The Hunter's Instinct ability. What this does is slow down time as mentioned before, but it is also always activated while aiming and jumping. This has no limits, unlike concentration, to how often you can use it, and as soon as you hit the ground, Aloy can just bounce back up again like it's just a rabbit. You can essentially gain unlimited concentration with this. And on top of the whole unlimited thing, you can also use concentration while you're doing this to slow down time even more. It is kind of redundant to be talking about what I would like to change with this game because Forbidden West is already out and for the most part most of it's fixed. I normally would have complained about Hunter's Instinct and said that they should just remove it or slow down time less, but considering that Forbidden West already solved that problem by essentially speeding up the Hunter's Instinct ability, I won't spend too much time on it, but I will say it is really funny to see Aloy acting like a bunny for the entirety of my playthrough. So, remember how I was talking about gear a few moments ago and different weapons? Now it's time to talk about how these actually work. So, essentially, each gear has the same stats, but each has a unique modifier that can be added onto it. Some gear might change how much damage an elemental types do to Aloy, while another might only work on frost or melee. Another outfit could do that with ranged. And the only other difference in these outfits are weaves. Everything about them is essentially the same except for the design and that one unique modifier. But what weaves do is that you can add these for more protection on an armor piece than it originally had. And each rarity of armor has a certain amount of weave slots as you go higher in rarity. More slots become unlocked as you upgrade your gear and get better. And these weaves can be found on dead machine carcasses or bought at merchants for a price of metal shards. And now we need to talk about the way that you receive these armors. Each armor has a unique set of requirements in order to buy, such as a Shellwalker heart or basically a heart of any other machine. And one of these armors is the Karja Blazon, which if you've been following my channel for a while, you've probably noticed a video where I got attacked by a Thunderjaw while I was on my way to collect Charger Hearts for the Blazon. Yeah, it was kinda terrifying. I decided I had to get this armor because I was having a really tough time with Fire Bellowbacks, and they were whooping my ass big time early game. There are no other reasons for me wanting this armor. At all. No alternate reasons at all. But anyway, I was on my way to collect Charger Hearts to trade in to get the Blazon. But one of the things that really irks me is how inconsistent the drop rates for these hearts are. Sometimes I need to kill 10 to 15 machines in order to find the part that I need. And this can become very annoying and very repetitive and very tedious very fast. It got to the point that I just kind of needed to take a break because I was gonna punch a wall. And the reason that I wanted the Blazon was because I was having trouble with the Fire Bellowbacks, as I said earlier. Not knowing how to deal with these got me frantically running away so many times. But that's my fault. I needed to have learned to use my weapons efficiently in order to have killed them quickly. But thankfully, I had a solution in mind that didn't require me to actually get better at the game. Instead, I decided to buy the Blazon for its unique perk of fire resistance. I grinded for a solid hour or two in order to find this. And upon finally getting the Charger Heart that I needed, I bought it. I put it on and quickly realized that I was not going to be fighting many fire enemies. One of the most annoying things about Zero Dawn is just how situational these outfits actually are. Because unless you're using a ranged or melee resistance damage absorber, you are not going to be using it very much. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that most, if not all of these armors, are going to be sitting there not doing really anything. This problem gets even worse at the end of the game with the unlock of the Shield Weaver. Now, I'm not against getting a broken armor set at the end of the game, it's kind of to be expected, so I don't really have a problem with this, but it's just that if you bought the Frozen Wilds DLC, which is most likely going to be played after the main story, after you get the Shield Weaver, the armors that you get in that DLC just feel a bit unnecessary when the Shield Weaver is literally designed to be the broken endgame outfit. Like, there's no reason to play the Frozen Wilds to get any of their armors, because, well, you already have the best thing in the game. So, as I already said, machines are some of the best enemies in the game to fight. They're all so unique all around and are just a joy to fight against. But this isn't really the case with the human enemies. Humans are, well, they're humans. They have melee attacks with their weapons and range attack with their bows. They aren't the most exciting things in the world, but they get the job done. To counter enemy melee attacks, Aloy has her own. But I would advise you not to use these, like, at all. It's very obvious that Horizon was designed to be played with range combat in mind, because it's, well, Horizon. Melee very much feels like an afterthought. You can do light and heavy attacks, lights are fast and do little damage, while heavies do more and deal knockdown damage. There's no combos or anything to be seen, no parrying or anything of the sort. This is by far the weakest part of the game, especially since melee just isn't that effective. But at the end of the day, I don't really find myself minding too much. Zero Dawn is best played ranged only, melee is extremely optional. Would I have liked more? Absolutely, I would have loved it if we had like a fully fleshed out melee system. But am I really upset about it? Not really. It's not really worth harping on this much because of the revamp Melee got in Forbidden West, so I'm just gonna kind of stop talking about it. And so the next question is where you find these enemies, and these are in bandit camps. These are just filled with enemies that you have to kill in order to rid the region of the criminals. It's essentially just a large area filled with enemies that you have to kill. How you go about this is all up to you. You can go in bows blazing or as quiet as a mouse. Like many open world games, Horizon Zero Dawn also has the option for stealth gameplay. Aloy can use the long red reeds to hide herself and attack unsuspecting foes. I'm convinced that the grass being red is why they made Aloy a redhead, not really that I'm complaining. Most human enemies will go down in a single hit from Aloy's spear, bar a few elite enemies that can be found at certain camps. Going in loud is typically the fastest way to get things done, human-wise, because of how easily they can be cheesed. But stealth becomes a lot more crucial when you're fighting machines. Because yes, machines can be assassinated. Sneaking up on a low-level machine will allow for an insta-kill when Aloy is hidden. This is most useful when having to deal with smaller enemies around a bigger one. Picking off a smaller enemy in an area before engaging the bigger one is a great way to make your life a whole lot easier. Most machines will actually stay in one spot for a long period of time, unlike humans, making stealth killing them a whole lot easier. But for the ones that don't, it gets much more interesting. Aloy's focus can pick up movement patterns of different machines, allowing Aloy to see each machine's path before it takes it. This can be extremely useful for a stealth player. Just knowing where it's going to go is such a lifesaver. There's also one more thing that I need to mention when talking about stealth, and that's going to be overrides. In Zero Dawn, Aloy can sneak up on an enemy and override it to help her in a fight against any other machine. Overrides are very interesting to use. If you override any machine, it will fight for you for a short time before returning to its normal state. And if you have to fight more than one enemy, this is going to be a very good option to level the playing field. And I just think it's really cool that you can just turn enemies against each other like this and just have them at your side if you're stealthy. It's a really great way to encourage stealth and make it so that people get rewarded for actually playing it, because you can get some really powerful machines on your side with this. I love the override feature. The only real problem with it is that sometimes you don't really have a need to use it very often, just because of how hard sneaking up on some of these machines actually are. Because some of these set pieces are very much designed for it, like you see in the background, but a lot of them just aren't, which is kind of annoying. But when you get the situation, I would highly suggest overriding a machine and using it to your advantage when you can, because these things can be game changers in a tough fight. I just think that it's a really neat and simple mechanic that can really just add a lot of depth to the gameplay, because not only are you balancing Aloy's bows, her arrows, and all the other things that Aloy can use, you're also balancing the machines that she can also override, which I just think is a very cool feature. It's really nice that there's this other playstyle in the game, and it actually gets expanded on in Forbidden West, but obviously this isn't a Forbidden West video, but we'll get to that later. And another thing with overrides is that when overriding a small machine, they will become your mounts. Because that's right, in Horizon Zero Dawn, your mount isn't really at your beck and call. You actually need to find one. Once you have a mount, you can call it to you at any time. But once it dies, you have to search for a new one. It's gone for good. Sure, it can be quite a bit annoying, but I think it's really immersive because you actually have to go and find these, unlike in any other game. It's a really small thing, but I think it is pretty nifty. And now, when talking about overriding machines, you also have to see if the override is actually unlocked for said machine. And the way that you unlock these overrides to help you in battle is through the Cauldron network. Scattered across the world are these massive technological achievements from the old world, designed solely for the purpose of making new machines. These caverns of metal offer a large area of platforming and battle. Aloy will need to make her way to the Cauldron's core in order to secure the overrides. She'll have to solve puzzle after puzzle to get to the center. And these cauldrons are all basically the same color, and don't really feel too different from each other. Once you've seen one, you've really kind of seen them all. It's enemy after enemy, puzzle after puzzle in each and every one. Yes, these are fun and offer a good challenge and variety of enemies, but the actual goal doesn't change, and the actual specific challenges don't change. It's kind of like the max level one feels exactly like the first one you enter. And again, this isn't the worst thing in the world, but it's just not that good. One thing that I really actually do like is that Cauldron IX, or 4, depending on whether you're reading it as a letter or a Roman numeral, is very much a departure from its norm. Because instead of killing machines, you have to kill enemy cultists who had infiltrated the Cauldron. And I think that's just a nice shakeup, as I said. but it's really only one of the 5. And all in all, Cauldrons are really fun to go through, but they don't really offer you a unique experience after the first one. But what I can say for certain is that my favorite thing about the Cauldrons is the atmosphere. These places feel almost mystical in their design, and for a good reason. That's what the old ones were to the Nora, ancient beings who rebelled against their creator before their society was promptly crushed by her. I appreciate it when the world and narrative just blend together like this. The old ones were seen as god beings, and I guess in some way so were the Cauldrons. And by the end of the game, I'm fairly certain a lot of the Nora think of Aloy as a god. But that's not how she starts out. To get from where she was to where she is at the end of the story, Aloy has to do a lot of grinding. And I mean a lot of grinding. You see, hunting is a part of the gameplay. Now, this isn't machine hunting, it's animal hunting. Aloy will run around and shoot things to get their precious skin and bones. I'm not joking, that is what is needed to upgrade storage capacity. In order to upgrade things such as your quiver, potion storage, and trap capacity, Aloy will need to spend hours on the hunt. The first thing I need to say about this is... why? Why make us spend hours looking for animals to kill? Not all animals even have a 100% drop rate for their skin and bones, so sometimes you have to kill 5 to 10 of each animal to get exactly what you want. I think my biggest pet peeves in games in general is when I feel like a game is just giving me busy work and wasting my time. And normally I wouldn't say Horizon does this. I think Horizon is very good at filling its time and making it feel meaningful, but this feels like it's wasting my time. This feels like it's wasting so much of my time. It's one of the most infuriating things about this game. Probably the biggest complaint that I have against this game is just the amount of grinding. I can understand if these were machine components, like similar to how you get outfits, but because it's not, it just makes it not fun because, you know, these things don't shoot back at you. They don't do anything. It's just a very infuriating thing, and I can't understand why it's in the game, or why it's still stayed in Forbidden West. At the time of recording this, I haven't had to upgrade anything in more than 8 months because that's just when I finished getting all the upgrades. And just thinking about it, I still feel tired with the constant running around that's associated with gathering materials. It's a legitimate nightmare. And yes, this video was supposed to be out half a year ago, but because I'm a procrastinator, nothing ever got done with it. And one other thing that irks me is that the whole foraging mechanic is really, really weird. It's just so unnecessary. You see, the main way of healing in Horizon is using medicinal herbs and plants that can be found scattered across the land. Once Aloy gets hit, you can use these to gain back a percentage of your total health. The healing system is actually pretty cool in that way because it's measured in percent and not total health regained, in order to avoid some plants being overpowered in the endgame. But my problem is that when you forge these, Aloy has to roam around looking for these plants to pick up. She has to stop whatever she is doing, such as riding her mount, and then pick it up. It takes way too much time. What kind of ends up happening is that you get into a fight, lose a bit of health, go forage for 10 to 15 minutes, and then go fight for another 5. You really do spend more time trying to find healables than you do actually fighting in a lot of the open world exploration areas. This is one of the reasons why I said the Shield Weaver was such a powerful armor that no one wants to remove. It's a constantly regenerating health bar that goes over your main health bar, meaning if you're good, you will never have to use any healables because the outfit is going to constantly refresh itself after a delay. And that's also why I said no one is going to be using the Frozen Wild DLC outfits, because they are all objectively worse than the Shield Weaver. And the reason why I use the Shield Weaver isn't because it's like the most overpowered armor in the game. If anything, I want to take it off because the game's not challenging with the amount of time that I've put into it. But the reason why I do continue using the Shield Weaver is just because it saves me time. It saves me a lot of time just going around and gathering. And I think that just kind of hurts the gameplay, because it takes away the challenge and replaces it with, well, no grinding. It's like, do you want a challenge or do you want grinding? It's not a very good trade-off that the game offers you. But on a more positive note, the way that you get the Shield Weaver is actually through a side quest that becomes available after finishing the second to last mission. And there are a lot of side quests in this game, and most of them are actually quite good. Some of them aren't memorable, but the ones that are certainly do their job really well. A lot of these less memorable ones are under the errands category instead of the side quest sections. This is just a glorified way of saying a fetch quest. I mean, that's literally it. You talk to an NPC and they tell you to go do something for them. That's what errands are. It doesn't excuse the amount of fetch quests in this game, but at least we know Gorilla is self-aware about them putting it in the game. But thankfully, some of these do actually have some substance. While the mission structure is very simple in these, there can actually sometimes be some really entertaining bits because of the lore and story. Some of these errands and side quests actually relate to the main story and give more context to the narrative as a whole. Granted, not all of these are going to relate back to the main narrative, but it can serve as some really good extra supplements to the player's understanding. This goes for all side quests as well. They can relate to the bigger picture despite only being, well, side quests. The only reason why I brought it up during the errand section was because I thought it was cool that the most minuscule form of side quests actually has lore implications. However, these aren't the only things in Horizon that have a narrative impact. The next are corruption zones. These are small areas dotted around the map filled with corrupted machines that need to be killed. The reason why this corruption is happening to the machines is a part of the story, so I'm not going to be getting into that. The only thing that you really need to know is that corrupted machines are stronger than their regular counterparts, but have one crucial weakness: fire. The corrupted machines have a higher damage output and a higher health pool, just like when Aloy overrides a machine, because story-wise, the same exact thing is happening when a machine is corrupted and when Aloy overrides a machine. On higher difficulties, these can be absolute nightmares to try to face. There is a corruption zone on the map that has two of the hardest enemies in the game being corrupted, which essentially means that they're even harder. The two rock breakers that spawned whooped my ass more than a number of times. But there is a very easy way to clear any corrupted machine, and this is the aforementioned weakness of fire. Fire becomes a weakness for every single corrupted machine in this game, meaning that they take more damage and get lit on fire easier than their non-corrupted versions. If you can exploit this well enough, it actually becomes even easier to kill one of the big corrupted machines than it takes to kill a normal machine. This is yet another example of learning through playing. If you fight the machine as a normal enemy, as you see in the background, it will destroy you. But if you use fire against it like it advised, life will be so much easier, and setting enemies on fire is actually extremely easy in this game once you have the triple notch skill. Aloy can fire 3 arrows out of a single bow during every shot, allowing the enemy to be doused in flames in an instant. The only trick with corruption zones is knowing how to get good spacing and positioning it so that the damage over time from the fire can kill the enemy before you get swarmed by them. It's not much, but it's something that rewards the more experienced players when they get used to the weakness of different machines. On paper, killing these things is really hard, but Horizon encourages the player to think about how they have to take down the machine, and that's just really what I love about the game so much. Because, in all honesty, this should be really hard, but because the game encourages you to learn from your mistakes and encourages you to grow as a player, it makes it so much more satisfying when you see this giant enemy and then you take it down with all the skills you learn. It's just such a good feeling. And now that I'm actually talking about the corrupted machines, I think it's time to talk about the story. Originally, I was going to go story beat by story beat and explain what I liked and what I didn't, but I decided that would be a waste of your time. But if you don't want that, make sure to leave a comment if you'd be interested in it, because I would happily make it, considering how much I love this game. But I'm going to be talking about the story in a non-spoiler fashion, so don't worry if you haven't played the game yet. So let's start off with what I think is the very best thing about the game's story, and this is the world building of Horizon. The thing that truly intrigued me the most was learning about how this world came to be, and Horizon does a fantastic job of explaining it. The death of the Old Ones is one of hubris, pride, and arrogance, and Zero Dawn gets it across to the player in such an amazing way. I, for one, am a huge fan of post-apocalyptic media. I love The Last of Us, 100 if anyone remembers that CW show, and Assassin's Creed, which I know isn't a post-apocalyptic world, but it is from the POV of the Isu. Exploring old ruins will never get old, or learning the way that the world just fell to ruin. I think that's going to be what drags the most players into the world of Horizon. The concept of fighting machines with a bow makes no sense and seems just like the devs had a cool concept. Most people would probably guess that the machines were what drove the old world to extinction, and that's one of the driving mysteries of this game. Why are the machines here? What do they do, and why did the world end up like this? It's probably the main question in every player's mind when they actually play the game. But this is actually a bit detrimental to our main story. You see, the game revolves around two storylines, the Mystery of the Old Ones and the present-day tribal feuds. Most of the common criticisms levied against Zero Dawn is that the story just isn't as compelling in the sections without the Old Ones. And these criticisms aren't entirely wrong. I wouldn't say the tribal story is bad by any means, but the Old Ones are just much more interesting and compelling. Fortunately, the game is very well paced with both of these different sections, with Aloy learning about the Old Ones while on a mission that may involve her tribe. And as the story gets to a close, you learn that these two storylines are a lot more connected than originally thought. And this is really one of my favorite things about the game. Zero Dawn weaves both aspects of the story together flawlessly. Sure, the rising action introduces both storylines, Aloy's quest to find her mother, which eventually leads to the Old Ones, as well as her journey to a shadowy cult. These things don't seem like they could be related, but they are, and it's great. And now we need to talk about my favorite anime waifu, Aloy. I was not prepared to read those words out loud, so... But anyway, one of my friends is going to watch this video and is going to be turning it off as soon as those words came out of my mouth. So, bye to you, you know exactly who you are. But in all seriousness, I actually like Aloy in both of the Horizon games. She's a strong-headed and stubborn woman who will stop at nothing to get what she wants. And also, she's really freaking strong and skilled. As in, freakishly strong and skilled. And I actually have a little bit of a problem with this. And no, this isn't going to turn into a rant about women being in video games, so just hear me out. I would have liked a narrative reasoning as to why she is as good as she is with the bow. We know she was raised an outcast by another outcast named Rost, but that doesn't really explain anything. And you're probably thinking why I'm bringing this up for Horizon specifically and not for, say, Assassin's Creed or any other game that I've spoken about. All of those characters are hyper competent in gameplay, and I don't have a problem with it. The issue that I take is that in those games, no one really remarks on the characters being really good at what they do. For example, Ezio is known for being a master assassin, not a killer. Connor is also brutal in gameplay, but no one really brings it up in conversation. And that's typically because most gameplay feats don't happen in canon. Connor killing 100 guards in Boston after assassinating someone isn't canon, it's just kind of what happens in gameplay. But in Horizon, for some reason, Aloy's feats are all canon. People know the things she does and the amount of people she kills. Like, inside quests, people will be like, oh, you single-handedly stopped the greatest threat the world has ever seen. And I just think that there should be a narrative reason for why she's so good at fighting. Just really something as simple as Rost being one of the best warriors the Nora had ever seen, and just passing those skills onto Aloy. Or that her being an outcast made her a lot stronger and tougher than those raised in comfort, i.e. the Fremen and Dune being the most skilled warriors because they lived such a harsh life. Or they could go into the lore and explain it using the complicated situation involving Aloy's birth. This isn't really the biggest problem. I would like it to be explained in the third game when it probably releases in 2027. This is just kind of someone nitpicking when I have nothing else to complain about. So, now back to my red-headed goddess. Oh lord, I can't believe I wrote that, but I'm gonna keep that in. She is perfect in- oh god. Alright, take two. She is perfect in every way imaginable. A model person in a perfect game. She's kind, she's smart, and she's strong. And that's my case for why Aloy is the best waifu in gaming history. If you cannot tell, I am trying so hard to keep it together recording this section. I fully wrote this expecting myself to just be able to record this as a joke, but this is one of the strangest things I've ever written, but I guess you're gonna have to deal with that. But all jokes aside, I really like Aloy as a character. She's snarky and a very no BS kind of person. She even has a lore reason as to why she spoils all of the puzzles in Forbidden West. She's a very endearing character, and I'm glad they wrote her the way that Gorilla did. The only negative thing I can really say is that she kind of treats her friends like shit. I mean, I say friends very loosely because she probably wouldn't even consider them to be her friends, but they would probably consider her to be theirs. Kind of my main issue. She's written that way for a reason. I mean, the only person she's spoken to in her 17 years of life was Rost, so it makes sense she doesn't have the most social skills. But it does get repeatedly annoying as the game goes on, especially in Forbidden West's earlier segments, but this isn't a video on Forbidden West. It's also a bit strange to criticize this choice because I'm assuming the third game is going to be about Aloy's character development, and her just letting other people in. What I'm saying is that it makes sense for her in character, but it doesn't make it not annoying. And then one more thing I need to talk about when I'm talking about Aloy is the facial animations. Because for some reason, Horizon Zero Dawn has very subpar facial animations. Now, I'm not sure why, but like, none of these people seem real. Maybe it's that it was mocapped weirdly, or just something, but like, all of the faces in Zero Dawn look so plasticky, and they just don't look convincing at all. It's like, they look good, but like, when someone's speaking, I don't really feel like they're putting any emotion into it at all. There's like a few scenes where I see the person's face move and I'm like, oh, that's an emotion. But for the vast majority of them, they're just no emotions. Like, Aloy will speak with a lot of emotion, but then her face will show absolutely none of it. And I am really clueless as to why. But I think Gorilla took this as a personal attack because Forbidden West is going to shock everyone who played this game. And one final thing before this video ends. To anyone who's sticked it out this far, you get to see the most random string I've ever posted on this channel. But I mentioned that Aloy is my red-headed goddess, and I'm going to show you the messages that led up to me calling her that. I hope you enjoyed that because this is never ever going to be brought up on my channel ever again. The only reason why this section is in this video is because I got a special request from the girl I sent those text messages to put those in, so I guess now you guys get to see that. So, to wrap things up, going away from whatever that was, Horizon Zero Dawn is one of my favorite games of all time. The combat, the story, and the world are second to none in my eyes. Everything about Horizon really just drags you into it, and I would highly recommend playing it. Maybe not going all the way to get a PS4 like me, but if you have the means, absolutely give it a shot. And that is going to be it for me. Next video is going to be on Black Flag. Not sure when I'll get around to it considering this relatively short script took half a year to make, but I will try to upload once every 2 months for the time being. And hopefully I can get through the remaining Assassin's Creed game that haven't been on my channel yet. I'm also super excited for Mirage, which Ubisoft promises to be a return to form, so I'll be super excited for that, and that will come out as soon as I get the chance. But to everyone who made it this far, have a good day.